Hey, we got you, Brett. Appreciate
Good
it.
deal. Yeah,
Thanks for joining today.
you got
All
it,
right,
man.
guys. All right, guys. We got a special guest joining us. It's Brett McMurphy, college football expert. Um, and Brett, just thanks so much again for joining us. And we'll just get started here. Just kind of, we got a lot of us here on this Sooner Surge. Got some high school guys going into college for journalism. Could you just kind of tell us, when did you decide? I know you went to OSU for journalism. When did you decide that's something you wanted to do?
I took journalism classes in high school, to be very honest, because all the hot chicks were in journalism, did the yearbook and stuff. I played, high school sports and all that. I love sports. I love, writing about sports. And I actually had like a partial scholarship to go to Easy Credit University. You guys know it better as East Central.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I was actually going to go there and play football. And my journalism teacher in high school, Kim Postlick at UConn High School, forced me to sit down and fill out a scholarship application at Oklahoma State to work in the sports information office and major in journalism. I told her I couldn't do it. I was going to be late to my next class. She said, I already talked to your teacher. Sit down and fill it out. She literally forced me to do it. I did it. I got a journalism scholarship. They're paid for my school to go to Oklahoma State. So I switched immediately my plans and ended up going to Oklahoma State. And ironically, I know this is an OU podcast. I grew up like the biggest OU fan in the world. My parents were big OU fans. My sister, 2 years younger than me, went to OU. She was actually a Roughneck Queen when
Oh,
she
wow.
was at Oklahoma. So I guess I was the black and orange sheep of the family. And my allegiance literally switched overnight when Oklahoma State said, "Hey, we'll give you a scholarship." And so that's how I got into journalism. So yes, I can be bought. Is the bottom line here.
Yeah, it's cool to hear about your journey into journalism. I'm going to be going to OU this fall for journalism at Gaylord. So, with OU getting into the OU stuff right now, we all saw the reports last week on that there's a good chance that the OU Texas move to the SEC is delayed till 2025. And we saw your tweet, obviously, on that's not necessarily the case. It's still a possibility that they go early. So what's going on in that whole situation?
Yeah, I would say the report, and I'm not sure who reported it, that said it's not going to happen until 2025 is inaccurate. I think there's still a good chance that it can happen in 2024. I reported back in December that there was momentum growing for OU and Texas to leave the Big 12 early for the SEC and make 2023 the last year in the Big 12. But also everyone that's involved, OU, Texas, the Big 12, ESPN, and Fox, they all realize the challenges for this to happen. And it's not simply like, you and I having a negotiation, and I'm like, okay, I'll give on this. And you're like, okay, I'll give on this. Okay, great. We got a deal, because there's 5 different parties involved. So what I've been told right now is that, it's not this simple, but I'll try to make it simple. OU, Texas, and the Big 12 kind of have an understanding, if you will, or not necessarily agreement because nothing's been signed, but kind of an understanding on what it would take for OU and Texas to leave early to the SEC. And I think those 3 parties are okay with that. What is not settled is the compensation that ESPN wants for this to happen, because obviously this impacts them with OU and Texas going to the SEC a year early, and also Fox. Fox loses the financially, because OU and Texas will not be on their network in 2024 if they're in the SEC. So how is Fox compensated? You can't say, I can't say, ESPN can't say, you can't tell Fox what they need to be made whole. That's something they have to decide. And so that's where it gets tricky. So while OU, Texas, and the Big 12 may have this understanding of what it's going to take for those guys to leave early, Fox may say, you know what, we need this. And it may be more games down the road with OU and Texas playing at Big 12 stadiums, or it may be basketball inventory, or it may be money or something like that. And so then that could change the dynamic between OU, Texas, and the Big 12. And so that's where it's kind of it's kind of challenging. The good news is everybody involved, OU, Texas, the Big 12, Fox, and ESPN, they all want this to happen. But it's not going to happen unless all 5 parties feel like they're made whole or they're not taken advantage of. So I think whoever reported that, maybe jumped the gun, because I guess maybe one of the 5 parties felt frustrated that, hey, this isn't going to work. This isn't going to happen until 2025. The people I'm talking to say negotiations are continuing. They're still optimistic this can happen. It's not going to be easy. And the good news is there's not a drop dead deadline. It's not like this has to happen by next week or even next month or 2 months from now. I talked to somebody in the SEC. When Missouri left the Big 12 for the SEC, they did that in November. They then started playing the following August or September, that football season. So we still have, technically we still probably have like 7, 8, 9 months left. So again, it's still working. Hopefully it happens. So that's a long-winded answer to say it's not dead, but it's not a done deal, but everyone's working for this to happen so they can get out in 2024.
Brett, just wanted to ask you for Oklahoma, if they potentially were to stay in the SEC or in the Big 12 for another year, do you think maybe that could benefit them as far as getting more another recruiting class in, more players? Venables getting another year to kind of build his talent. So do you think that would maybe help Oklahoma before they go to the SEC?
I mean, you could, to be very honest, I don't know. You could spin it either way. You could spin it by saying, well, hey, if you're in the Big 12 another year, you obviously have an easier path to the college football playoff. In 2024, the playoff goes to 12 teams. You would think, and I'm an Oklahoma State guy, that it's going to be easier to get to the playoff if you're in the Big 12 than if you're in the SEC. If your name's not Georgia and not Alabama.
Yeah.
So you could spin it that way. As far as recruiting, I mean, I think, the way NIL is now and all the mess going on with that, I don't think it really matters what conference you're in. Kids are going to go where they can play, where it's, they feel like they can make the biggest impact, perhaps, gain the most financially. So I don't know. I guess part of your question could be maybe perhaps they could build the program and make it, more stronger, so that when they do go into the SEC, they'll be more prepared for that. Obviously this past year was not what OU fans expected, not what Venables expected, not what Joe C expected. But you look at the history of Oklahoma, that's usually a 1-year blip or a 2-year blip, and not a long several season drawn out that would happen like that. The challenge for Oklahoma is, and also for Texas, is the degree of difficulty is 10 times harder now. And I'm saying that as a Big 12 guy, but that's the reality. I mean, there's more bodies to climb over in the SEC to get to the top. And you look what Georgia's done. I mean, people are saying, is the game past Saban by? No, there's going to be no one more dedicated this year than Saban to prove everybody wrong. But you look at what Kirby Smart's done at Georgia. If not for Tua coming in the second half of that national title game, they would have won 3 of the last 4 titles. And then you look what Brian Kelly did in year 1 at LSU. I mean, it was just, it's easier to list teams that don't have a chance in the SEC, Vanderbilt, than list teams that do. And so that's going to be the challenge for OU and Texas going forward in that 16-team league, which, by the way, expect them to play 9 conference games. So now your schedule got even harder than it did when it was in the Big 12.
Yeah, and you talk about the SEC. What are you hearing as far as, we've heard many different ways that's going to look with pods or with divisions, or what are you hearing as far as SEC in the future, what that's going to look like with how many teams they're going to have in there? Yeah, I mean, they nothing has been determined. Usually they vote on that at the spring meetings, which are in Destin, Florida, the end of May, around Memorial Day. Obviously for OU and Texas, that'd be great if they knew they were going to be in 2024, because then they could finalize those schedules. There's a lot of different opinions on this within the SEC. Some of the AD, some of the schools,
They want, the 16 teams with no divisions. Other want pods. Some schools want it to stay at 8 conference games. I don't think that's realistic, because if you've got 16 teams and you only play 8 conference games, you're going to go, 5-6 years before you can play everybody in your conference. I think the most popular model is you have 3 permanent opponents that you play every year. Obviously for OU, you would think Texas would be one of those. Who the other 2 would be, is up in the air. And you play those guys every year, home and away every other year. And then your other 6 opponents would rotate. You possibly play home and away against those 6 schools for the next 2 years. And then the years 3 and 4, you'd have another 6 different schools. And so that way, potentially, if you have a player there that's there for 4 years, he would have the opportunity to play everybody in the league. So, but none of that stuff's been finalized. I don't think we're going to see divisions like they currently have them now. I think it'll be like the Big 12 setup, no divisions, because especially with the way the college football playoff is going to be, the highest rated conference champions get an automatic bid to the college football playoff. And so if you have 2 divisions and you have a weak division and somehow that team pulls off an upset, then you may not get an automatic bid to the playoff. You obviously would get at large teams. So I think that's why they'll go without divisions when OU and Texas come on board.
Yeah. Hey, Brett, I listened to some of your interviews last year before the season started on Big 12 predictions, and you had said multiple times that sleeper teams were TCU and K-State, and you were right on, obviously. But what was it about TCU that kind of that tipped you off that they were going to have such a great year? I mean, they had an unbelievable year. Sonny Dykes, and the difference between Sonny Dykes' first year and Brent Venables at OU is just total different. So, just kind of what was it about TCU, and what is it about Sonny Dykes that was able to just get that program right so quickly?
Yeah, I just think Sonny's a good guy, so I was probably biased on that part. And maybe I was ahead of my skis on that and just was fortunate to be right. Technically, though, he didn't win the Big 12, so I guess I was wrong on that aspect. I never would have envisioned, and I don't think he would have either, that they would get to the college football playoff. I just knew how good of an offensive coach he was. And he was in a horrible situation at Cal. He got to SMU. He's one of the best offensive minds out there. And just talking to him at Big 12 Media Days in Dallas, you could tell how excited he was. And not that, every coach is excited, but you could really tell that he felt like he had a lot better caliber athlete at TCU than he did at SMU. And that's not a slight at SMU. It's just the reality of being a Power 5 school or a Group of 5 school. And you could just tell that he kind of had all the pieces there. And yeah, to show how smart Sonny is, Max Duggan was the backup to start the year. So, things just broke right for them. Kansas State, Chris Kleiman, I think, is one of the more underrated coaches in the country. I think, folks in the Big 12 realize what a pain in the ass it is to play Kansas State, because they suck you into their style of play, and it's hard to play. And I thought they would be decent. The other thing is, I just thought the Big 12 was just so balanced. I thought Baylor had the great year, but it's hard to repeat. Oklahoma State, I think Oklahoma State underachieved. All the talent they had coming back offensively, they jumped out of the gate, gangbusters, and then injuries killed them, and just they just fell off a cliff at the end of the year. So I thought it was kind of wide open. I kind of always think Texas is overrated. And until they win a conference or actually playing a conference title game, I guess I'll continue to think that. And so because of all those different factors, I just thought, you look at the odds, and TCU is a pretty big long shot, and I'm like, well, if you're gonna bet on somebody to win the Big 12, take a flyer on a long shot, because I think they have as much of a chance as a Baylor or an OU or a Texas. And they did get to the title game, they didn't win it, and that's why I kind of like for this coming year. Again, it's easy to I'm sure Texas is going to be the favorite because of all they have coming back and Manning coming on board. I'm sure TCU is going to be a favorite. It's going to be hard to repeat. A flyer that I like right now is Texas Tech. They return a ton. Joey McGuire did a great job in his first year. You guys know firsthand what they can do offensively. If they can make a stop or two, they can make some noise. So I kind of look at Texas Tech kind of like I did TCU. I'm not going to guarantee Texas Tech's going to win the Big 12, but I think they've got enough pieces offensively, and they finished strong at the second half of last season. I think they could maybe have a TCU type year within the Big 12. I'm not predicting they're going to get to the college football playoff, but I think Texas Tech is one of those schools like TCU last year that kind of has those pieces in place. And look, they'll either make me look like a genius or an idiot, but I won't be surprised either way.
Yeah. Brett, do you think the college football playoff change and the change with going to 12 teams, do you think that'll be good for the game?
I do, because I think more people are going to be involved. More when we get to November, it's going to be like, you're going to have 20 or 30 teams that have a legitimate shot to get to the playoff. And so I think that's a good thing. Do I think that means we're going to have a different champion? No, I think we're still going to have the same suspects: Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama, those guys. But I do think one thing that is actually going to be a consequence of this that I don't think a lot of people are looking at is I think the teams in these power conferences that are not among the top 3 or 4 teams in the conference. So let's say, for instance, the SEC, if you're not Alabama, if you're not Georgia, if you're not an LSU, or Tennessee is now, moving up. If you're not one of those 4 teams and you're below that, and say every year you finish 5th to 9th or whatever within the conference, you're probably not going to get to the college football playoff. So what's going to happen? Their fan bases are going to look around and they're going to say, oh, wow, UCF is in the college football playoff. Boise State's in the college football playoff. Texas Tech's in the college football playoff or whatever. Why can't we get to the playoff? We need to get rid of our coach. We need to find somebody to get to the playoff. And I really think, and I hate that this is going to happen, but I really think that those teams kind of in the mid-tier that are almost good enough to get there but don't get there, that's going to be so frustrating for those fan bases when they look around the country and they see that 2 or 3 teams from the ACC, from the Pac-12, from the Big 12, from the SEC get in. 2 group of 5 teams. You got Sun Belt teams getting in. You have the teams from the Mountain West getting in. Everybody's getting in except you guys, because not you guys, Oklahoma, but that mid-tier group, whoever that's made up of. And I think because of that, I think you're going to see a lot more turnover within the coaching ranks. As if it can't get any more crazy, I think it can. And also maybe you have coaches that are at, if you're at a Boise State, or you're at a, if you're at a USF, or you're at a, App State or something like that, and you have an offer to go to one of these mid-level Power 5 jobs, maybe you have second thoughts, because the money's so crazy now everywhere, where you're like, well, look, if I stay here and I can dominate the Sun Belt, or I can dominate the American, or I can dominate the Mountain West, I'm guaranteed a playoff spot. If I go to middle of the road Power 5 school, I've got to, there's more bodies to climb over. Georgia, Alabama, LSU, Tennessee. I don't know if I can get to that. So maybe I'm better off staying where I'm at. So that's something to keep your eye on, 3 or 4 years down the road. Where OU and Texas, end up in that mix is yet to be seen. Are they going to be, one of the bell cows of the SEC? Certainly they have the brand recognition. That's why they're coming in. But will they be able to compete against, the Alabamas and the Georgias and get over that hump and get into the playoff?
Yeah, Brett, there's a lot of arguments on Twitter. I'm sure you see some of it on who's the number 1 quarterback in the class of 2023. Is it Arch Manning with Texas, or Jackson Arnold at OU, or Nico with Tennessee? Who do you think's the best quarterback in this class?
Wait, there's arguments on Twitter This is breaking news. I need to tweet that. I never knew that. I'll be very honest with you. I used to follow recruiting like every day, and then finally I didn't have to. So I honestly would not have any opinion on that that's worth anything. Bottom line is, I think whatever situation you're in contributes a lot to who's the best quarterback. And you look at Max Duggan's a perfect example. The guy didn't even start the season. I know he wasn't an incoming freshman, but it's kind of what the team is around you. So, you got all the guys with all the grades. They're obviously highly touted guys, but yeah, I'm gonna bail on you on this one on who the best QB is coming up.
Hey, I understand that, man. Hey, what about, you mentioned, I heard you say earlier, NIL mess. That's probably a very good way of describing this NIL. But what kind of overall thoughts on after a year with NIL? Is it worse than you expected, better, or about what you thought?
It's it's to the point where nothing surprises me. Andy Staples of The Athletic did an incredible story on the kid that was going to go to Florida and then got out of his NIL deal, and now he's at Arizona State. And they actually, some businessmen in Florida were actually prepared to pay him $13 million over 4 years. He got a copy of the contract. Read that if you haven't had a chance. That is so crazy. And look, I have no issue. If somebody wants to pay a kid $13 million, then more power to him. I think players should be compensated. But I know coaches, have an issue because there's no, quote, guardrails on this, and they want to figure out how to make this equal for everybody. I don't think you can. At this point, it's almost like, building a super highway and not having a speed limit and letting everybody drive whatever speed they want for 3 years. And then one day putting up a 35 mile per hour speed limit sign. How many people are going to drive 35? Absolutely no one. So I know the NCAA is talking like they're going to start enforcing this more. I don't see how you enforce it. I don't think you can suddenly say, okay, these are the rules now. You got to follow this. We'll forget everything that happened in the past. Let's do this going forward. I don't know what the solution is. And I know a lot of people don't know what the solution is. And that's what's been so frustrating. And so we'll have to see where this ends up. I do know that a lot of these numbers getting thrown around, I don't think these are legitimate. I don't think they're accurate. That's what was so fascinating with Andy's story, is he actually had a copy of the contract that showed that. But with so many guys out here saying, oh, I was offered X amount of million to go here or there, I think most of it's BS, to be honest.
Yeah, Brett, before we get you off here, I have a little bit of a lightning round for you. A couple questions, if you could answer them real quick. Who's your favorite athlete of all time?
Probably Magic Johnson. Growing up, that's when he was playing for the Lakers, so I really liked him. Going further back, when I was a kid, Roger Staubach. I was a huge Cowboys fan. Not so much now, but I was back then.
Yeah. In your opinion, what's the best college football team of all time? Single team, single year.
Oh man, I told you growing up, I was an OU fan. Probably the 74, 75 OU teams. I think they were on probation. They were undefeated. They couldn't go to a bowl game. You had Joe Washington, Selmans were around that time. That would be it. Or I would go with that.
And then final question, who do you got in the Super Bowl this Sunday?
I'm just wondering, did you guys do like a special 8-hour edition on, is Jalen Hurts an OU product or an Alabama product?
We
could have done that for sure.
I did put out an article about former Sooner Jalen Hurts. So
yeah, well, good luck with that one. Yeah, I honestly don't have a dog in that fight, so I don't care. But I'm sure Alabama and OU fans were both claiming them, which is cool. I actually would like. I think Philadelphia is going to win. I think it's not that I want them to win. I think they'll win because I think they have the better offensive and defensive lines. Mahomes is incredible. I just don't think they're going to have the running game. And I think it'd be cool for Hurts to win all the stuff he went through in college. He persevered. He's a team guy. He's not an eye guy. And I'm not saying Mahomes is, but I've always admired Jalen Hurts no matter where he played. And I think Philly will win. I hope they win. I hope I'm right. We'll find out soon enough.
Yeah.
Awesome. Brett, man, we appreciate you once again joining us. Guys, make sure to follow him on Twitter, also a Rise for Action Network. And just once again, Brett, really appreciate taking time out of your, I know you're busy. College football is not a season anymore. It's a year-round deal. So thank you very much.
You got it, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Brett.
Thanks,
Appreciate it.
man.